Hi friends, Mickey Mankis here and welcome to Out the Back Door. Today I'm going to be canning up golden beets. I'm going to pickle them and I'm going to do plain, so join me. Alright, you may have seen my video when I did the Detroit red beets. I pickled those and those really turned out good, but I'm going to be pickling the golden beets a little bit differently. So I thought I'd share this recipe with you. And then also I am going to be canning plain beets so that I can use them in different recipes. You are not going to believe how many hours it took me to scrub all of the beets and then get them into a boil because a lot of them were larger, and so I had to boil them for about 40 minutes. So I probably went through 7 or 8 different batches. It took me quite a while. And what I noticed this morning is once I got going and I started peeling them and everything was when I didn't have them in water right away, they started oxidizing and turning color. They were getting dark, so I had to quit and I pitched those out to the deer so that they'd have a treat to eat. And what I've got in here right now is a mixture of water, which is going to be our brine. I also used white balsamic vinegar. I had special ordered this on Amazon. It's a 6% acidity instead of 5. And I wanted the balsamic, but I did want white. I didn't want that dark color in there. So far I have dumped 3 bottles in with my water. I dumped enough water in there to equal 4 bottles. I believe these are 17 ounce or 500 milliliter. I will be adding this in to equal parts of water in the vinegar. You can use plain white vinegar if you want, but I just decided, being I'm going to change this recipe a little bit, I wanted to try the balsamic vinegar in there. So I'm going to be adding this in, and then I'm going to peel and cut up a few more of the beets to put them in here. So I've got enough liquid covering them. I know it'll handle it in all the jars and everything, and we can go from there. Another thing you might want to get ready at the same time, I'm going to be using some of my red onions from the garden. I'm just going to slice these up, and I'm just going to put a small amount in each jar. So this is totally optional, but this is part of my recipe that I'm doing. All right, one other thing. For sweetener, I am going to be using honey. And I've mentioned before, like in my canning carrots, all I have is raw honey on hand. And once you start processing it, you're going to destroy any of the beneficial properties of the honey. So you can use a plain honey. You don't have to go and buy raw honey if you do want to follow this recipe. I also have pink Himalaya salt, and I'm going to be using that in here. So right now, I just kind of wanted to show you what I'm gathering together and what I'm going to get prepped and everything. And I'm going to finish cutting up the rest of my beets to get in here, along with dumping this in, and then we're going to get to the next step. I had peeled a few more beets and cut them up and put them in my bowl that has the water and vinegar in it right now. You might want to wear gloves too doing that. Actually, it was the skins and the greens that were still on the top that really stained my fingers and hands. But anyway, so I chopped up approximately 4 medium-sized red onions. You can leave this out if you want, or you can add more. If you want to add garlic, go ahead. But I decided I was going to use some of the red onions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do this fairly quick because, like I said, I don't want my beets, oxidizing and turning color on me. A lot of the liquid is turned a beautiful golden orange already because the color has been leaching out of the beets into the water, but we're going to be using that because we've got the vinegar and everything in there. I also have the heat under my canner right now. Yeah, so I've got the pressure canner out. We're water bath canning, but I've got the pressure canner out because when I do the other batch of beets, I'm just going to can them plain. I'm not pickling them. Those have to be pressure canned. So I decided, well, I'm going to steam can then. And you've seen me do that in other videos, so it's not really something new to you. If it is, ask me and I'll recommend a couple of different videos where I was steam canning so you can learn how to do that if you want. So what I'm going to do first, all right, get rid of my onions here. Also, I warmed up my honey so it's a little more liquefied, easier for me to work with. It just happens to be the local honey that I buy. It comes in an 8-pound tub, but it's pretty solid and opaque. It doesn't look like your regular raw honey that you're going to buy at the grocery store or whatever, but I really do like the flavor of this one. So I am going to start jarring up kind of one by one, and we're going to leave a 1/2 inch headspace on these. I'm going to stick just a few pieces of the onion in there. And then I am going to ladle some of my brine. It's a cold brine right now. I'm not heating this up. Okay, another thing I'm going to be adding, like I said, is my honey. I'm going to put approximately a tablespoon of honey into each one of my pint jars for a sweetener. And then the salt, like I had mentioned, I'm using the pink Himalayan salt. You can use regular white salt if you like. I just recommend canning salt. Don't use an iodized table salt because that has fillers in it, and your iodine and stuff in there, it's going to cloud up your liquid and it's not going to look pretty. So I am going to put a 1/2 teaspoon salt into each one of my pint jars. Kind of debubble. So right now, this is what my jar is going to be looking like. Looks like I need to take a little bit of liquid out. I'm kind of like at a 1/4 inch headspace, and I don't want that. I want a 1/2 inch. So I will get a teaspoon and dip some of my liquid out. I'm going to wipe off my rim, make sure that that's all clean. And check this out, I'm using metal flats today. These are the ones that came with these jars. Now I said I had the flame on underneath my pressure canner. I'm warming up my water, warm. I have it on low, the lowest it'll go, because everything else is room temperature right now. I don't want any temperature shock. I'm just gonna set these jars over here, and once I get a few more filled up, then I'll put them into the canner. See, at first I didn't want to put the onions and the honey and the salt into the jars because I didn't know if I was going to have enough of the beets and the brine to fill all the jars, and I decided, looking at it, I've got plenty. So I'm just kind of throwing everything into the bottom. And yes, I realize you're not going to see the onions, and you can use white onion too if you want. It's just that I know that the red onions don't last as long as my yellow ones do, so I do want to get going and use them up because I'm almost at the end of them. I didn't plant that many this year. One of the reasons I said I was going to do one jar at a time, other than the fact that I was concerned about the beets being out of the liquid too long, is I didn't know if I was going to have enough beets cut up and enough brine to do all 12 jars. So that's why I wasn't going to do all of them at once. Well, I've decided I can work fast enough, and I've got enough ready to do these. I did place some of the onion and the honey and the salt into the bottom of each of the jars. Now, some of you may question, well, being that, for example, the onion, some people are concerned you can't use onion in a water bath canning process. Well, if you're pickling, yes, you can. And that is what we're doing with this recipe, is we're pickling. Being they're squatty like this, I can double stack quarts in my canner and the pints and everything, but being these are so short, if I had that many to do, I could triple stack them in there. It's gonna be the same thing. That's why I love steam canning. You don't need all that extra water in there. I do have some left in there. I've got jars prepared yet that I can start filling these up so that I can finish that up. Once you get your jars ready and you get them into your canner, and like I said, everything is at room temp and the water's just warm in the canner. Water bath can for 20 minutes. And I'm going to be steam canning for 20 minutes. Just remember, I'm going to bring my temperature up slowly for steam canning, but you're going to want to do the same thing when you're water bath canning for anything that is room temperature. Besides avoiding temperature shock and having jars break on you, less chance of siphoning. Well, that band kind of got bent in transit. Let's see if that's going to work or if I got to grab another one. The purpose of the band, remember, is just to hold your lid down during processing. Now, the one thing when you're doing pickled vegetables, when you're doing cucumbers to make dill pickles, anything like that, or if you're doing pickled vegetables, pickled beets, anything like this. You have to wait at least 2 weeks after you process in order to dig into them, because that's when the flavor is going to be the best. I try to wait a month before I start opening up my jars. But okay, here we go. And they look pretty. All right, I'm going to get these into the canner, and I'm going to put the lid on just to keep it warm in there. I'm not going to bring the temp up because I've got more jars to work on. All right, I've got a mess to clean up. I've got all of my pickled beets into the canner right now. And remember, we are water bath canning, but I need my pressure canner again, so I'm steam canning. We are going to be processing for 30 minutes. I ended up with 16 of the pint squatty jars from Kerr? I think they're Ball. I've actually got 3 layers going right now in the steamer. And then I pulled out some of my Lafayette, 6 of those. And I was able to use up almost all of the brine. There wasn't enough for me to go and start washing up more jars and everything again. So it was just, I left it at that. All right, so once this starts, I see a slight stream coming out of the vent pipe. I will turn my temperature up. It's on a medium heat right now, but then I will kick it up a little bit higher. Just remember, even with the regular water bath canning, we don't want to shock those jars and, you know, apply really hot heat to them immediately. We're going to take our time. 2 reasons. We don't want temperature shock and jars breaking, and we don't want it siphoning. Once I see that little bit of stream and I'm turning my temperature up on high, then once I have a steady stream of steam coming out of my vent pipe, then I'm going to start my timing for 30 minutes. That's the difference between the water bath canning and the steam canning. I've got 2 trays, so I've got 3 layers of jars in my canner right now with 2 inches of water in the bottom. That's it. That's why I like steam canning, especially when I have so many jars to do. So I'm going to get going on the peeling the rest of the beets and chopping them up and everything, and I'm going to get them into the bowl with some water. I am going to be saving that water because the flavor and the color are going to leach out of the chunks of beet, just like when we were pickling them. So I want to save that and use that in the jar for canning. Let me start doing that and I'll show you the next step. Well, I finished chopping up all of the beets and now I'm going to get them canned up. I did let the canner cool down a little bit before I decided I was going to start doing this, because being this is still at room temperature, I didn't want to put the jars into boiling water. I definitely would have an accident then. So, and I'm going to fill these up. Now, these are pint jars again that I'm using, and I'm going to be pressure canning these for 20 minutes. I'm also going to do them at 10 pounds of pressure. That is what we do for our elevation. And I'm going to be leaving approximately 1 to 3/4 inch head space. So I'm more or less going to do the same thing that I did with the pickled beets that I've taken out already. I'm going to be using the liquid that the beets have been sitting in to pour into my jars. I'm also going to be adding 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to use the Himalayan salt again. Now, it's not necessary to put the salt in. I'm adding it for flavor. It has nothing to do with preserving. All right, let me get these filled up. Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to put 1/2 teaspoon of Himalayan salt into each pint jar, and I have to pay attention that I don't double up on any of them. That would be nasty. And as I said, you don't have to put salt in if you don't want. I'm going to grab my Tatler lids. They've been on the burner scalding. Boy, I almost did a big no-no. I forgot to wipe down my rims, and I was about ready to start putting my lids on. Now I can get my lids on. So how do you like to eat your plain beets, or don't you eat plain beets? Actually, they're kind of good fried up for breakfast with eggs and toast, potatoes, fried up with potatoes and onion. I'm about to burn my fingers. Whew. Out of curiosity, how many of you have switched over to reusable lids? I mean, it doesn't have to be Tatler, it can be Harvest Guard, and I don't know if there's any other brands out there or not. I guess I'm just not aware of them. But have you made the switch, or are you still on the search for the metal flats? I did order some from Lehman's. Okay, once I get all the bands on and everything, I'm going to put these into the canner. I'll get my lids secured down and everything, and I am going to slowly turn my heat back up. As I said, I did let the water cool down. The canner's been sitting for over half an hour without anything in it or the heat under it. I don't want any jars breaking. And so then I'll slowly bring my heat up. And remember to vent for 10 minutes. My pressure is 10 pounds for our elevation, and I will be processing for 20 minutes. So I'm going to get them into the canner. It ended up a really late night by the time I got the rest of the plain beets out of the canner, so I decided I'd wait until this morning to finish up the video here. The pickled golden beets really look nice. I like the color and everything. One thing I noticed, the red onions that I had put in there, they turned white after they canned, so don't be surprised if that happens. Anyway, and just a reminder, the pickled beets are going to have to sit for at least 2 weeks before you dig into them. If you can hold off for a month, it'd be better yet. The longer that they're sitting before you open them up, the better the flavor gets. Now, the plain beets that I had canned up, we can open these up at any time in order to use them. And all of those sealed really well. I did have a jar of the pickled beets that didn't seal. Now, these are the Lafayette jars and lids, and I forgot, being that these are older and they're not American made, the lids are a lot thicker, and this ended up buckling on me. I didn't think I had the band on too tight, but if you ever have any lids that do buckle, 99% of the time it's going to be the band was on too tight, and I usually put them on pretty loose. So I don't know what happened, but I'm going to stick it in the refrigerator. That's one thing to know. If you do have a jar that didn't seal, when you go to check them, if it doesn't seal, just go and put it into the refrigerator and use it up right away and you're fine. Now these I'm just going to leave in there 2 weeks before I start digging into them, but they'll be in there safe. So I want to thank you for joining me on canning up these golden beets. I did the recipe a little bit different compared to the Detroit Reds that I did. And if you did enjoy this video, please give me a thumbs up and share. And if you have any comments, please leave them below. So until next time, you have a wonderful day. God bless. I'm adding a little bonus tip at the end of this. If you watched all the way through, thank you very much. When you're labeling your jars, if you're not gifting them away, because I know you want to put nice little labels on them and everything, if you're just putting these in your pantry, you know what you can do? Just a regular permanent marker. I used to take the time to put everything out on masking tape and putting it down. It's not necessary. I want to show you as an example. I already wrote Beets 21 on my jar tops here. These are my reusable ones. This also works on your metal flats if you plan on reusing your metal flats. So one thing I do suggest, don't use a red marker. That takes a little bit more to get it off. I'm going to show you how I easily remove my labeling from these. I put a little bit of alcohol, rubbing alcohol in this little spritzer, and I am just going to spray it on, paper towel, wipe it clean. That's all there is to it. So now you don't have to spend time going and getting all these fancy labels or whatever. If it's going down into your pantry and you really don't care about all that, all you want to do is make sure that you've got your food labeled and the date on it so you know what it is and when you canned it. So I hope that little tip helps you. Thanks for joining me.